part of it in his mind, and he's going to be happy to have that on his wall. As I went and did it without Bill, can he do the same?
What do you think, Troy, as you sort of watch this whole thing play out? We haven't had you through this whole season and everything else. What do you think of what Arians said and the Brady-Bill factor in all this?
Yeah, I mean, it means everything. The greatest players are sensitive, and you're sensitive because it matters to you. So imagine being tied to one person your entire career, and your greatness is tied together, and now you go your separate ways. You want to prove that you're better than your ex. You want to go out there and you want to go and show that you can get it done by yourself, and that's exactly what he was able to accomplish. And for him to do it in year one, it all played out that way, and it proves not necessarily that Bill Belichick isn't the greatest coach, because he is, but it also proves that Tom Brady is capable of being that leader that can elevate a different organization, which we would have never had if they didn't have that sensitive, fractured ego.
Graziano, jump on in here. What do you make of it?
Yeah, look, this is a lot of what we were saying a year ago when Tom Brady left, and a lot of what Brady was saying, too. I enjoyed my time in New England. It's time to try something different. And obviously, that's what worked out. You know, you don't want to obviously be labeled a, I guess to use the word of the day, sidekick to Bill Belichick in New England for all those years. So he's proven, obviously, if anyone had any doubts, that he was much more than that. But yeah, I think I think this is something, as Dominique said, you know, you can hang on your wall. I did this. I accomplished this. This was me. And now it's up to Belichick, as we've discussed earlier in previous weeks, to sort of show that he can win without Tom.
And then just a quick final thought, Dominique, because this came up on the show last week. Odell Beckham to the Buccaneers to play with Tom Brady. Like it or don't like it?
I mean, I love it from an entertainment standpoint and from us watching standpoint, but the more that I think about it, the most important thing for them to do is to protect that offensive line and that defensive line. They're going to be losing Sue. So if you get OBJ, that's fine. That's going to make that offense even more explosive, but that's not what this offense needs. I think Odell Beckham is much more useful in other places where they do not have a glut of weapons. They need to figure out how to bring Chris Godwin back and use whatever money they might be allotting for Odell Beckham to make sure that they replace Ndamukong Suh, because that's what won them the championship, that defense.
Okay, and so I want to leave it there because we saved the best for last today. And by the best, I mean that commercial-free for these 15 minutes until then, talking about Carson Wentz, who had a higher total QBR than Jalen Hurts did as a starting quarterback last year, but it was Hurts who averaged more touchdowns and yards in his starts. Yesterday, former Eagles quarterback Ron Jaworski was a guest on KJZ on ESPN Radio. Here's what he said.
If you ask me just on a pure talent perspective, I think it's Carson Wentz, but that is not how this has played out. I believe that he has tremendous God-given talent that I think he still has a bright future. Jalen Hurts played well in 4 games, but I just don't think the sampling is big enough to say, yeah, Jalen Hurts should be the quarterback. I think at this point, hey, you know what? Go to camp. Let 2 guys battle it out. Isn't that what professional sports is all about?
So that's an interesting piece of this. And Booger McFarland is shaking. Boog, why are you shaking your head?
Well, because in a very level situation, that's what you want to do. We're all competitors. Let's go to camp and may the best man win. But, Greeny, let's understand something. Both of these guys were there last year, and if you watched any of the games, man, Jalen Hurts come off to the sideline. Him and Greeny, they got handshakes, and they high-five, and it's all kind of stuff. Because there's a relationship between Jalen Hurts and his teammates. There was zero relationship between Carson Wentz and his teammates. Like, they were standoffish, and there was a reason, I think, that he's got to get out of there, and that Doug wanted to play Jalen Hurts. So can he go back there? Yeah, he can go back, but it's going to be the same thing. There's not going to be a relationship between the guy pulling the trigger and the guy that he's throwing the football to. And Greeny, in football, that matters. That's the reason why Jalen Hurts was able to lift his teammates up. Some guys were able to play better. I just don't think the guys in the locker room really know who Carson Wentz is, nor do they want to play with him. So I don't think he can go back there.
Well, we have a guy who was in that locker room and played with him here on the show today. So, Tori, again, you were on that Super Bowl team in 2017. What is your sense of that, of the way that Carson and Jalen Hurts could interact or coexist, I guess is a better word, if they were there together, and your sense of the way the players feel about them both?
Yeah, I think they could go out there and compete for the job simply because that's the way football works. But the reality of it is, I haven't seen a franchise quarterback that you pay over $100 million that's competing for a job. That's not the norm in this league. But also when it comes to relationships, I believe they love both guys in the locker room. However, Carson's from the Midwest, and I'm not trying to disrespect anyone there. Jalen is a Q from Omega Psi Phi, and he has a lot more swagger. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's a better teammate, because I know Carson was loved, and I love Carson as a teammate, but there are going to be handshakes by Jalen. Carson's going to give you a high five and a great job, bud, and keep it moving. But I believe both guys are capable of leading this team. But like Booker said, it's time to move on simply because that relationship is bruised, and I would even go as far as to say it's broken.
Yeah, and then that's the way it feels. But Booker, let me just quickly come back to you, because quarterbacks, and we've talked a lot about being sensitive on the show this morning, but the reality is quarterbacks, the established ones, are sort of accustomed to it being their team. So do you believe you can have that situation, just that, forgetting what the other teammates think of them, that dynamic where can you have those two guys really battling it out, knowing what we have seen from Carson Wentz?
Well, it's amazing. We started a segment on sensitivity, and Dominique Foxworth is not in it, so that's what we need in this segment. That's number one. Number two, Greeny, that's going to be tough because of the offseason. There are already reports about Jalen Hurts getting the receivers to come to Texas and throw. So you mean to tell me that Carson Wentz, if he's still on this team, is not going to be upset by that? Like, the quarterback is the alpha. He is the guy that runs the show. He sets the tone. And you're right, Greeny, it's his team. So how can you have that with a guy who has a better relationship? And I get what Tori's talking about, being a member of Omega Psi Phi. He's relatable, Greeny. The guys gravitate toward him. They want to be around him. Nothing against Carson, but the relationships just weren't there. So, again, I just think it's going to be tough for a guy who's sensitive to come into a locker room and have to deal with everything that happened last year when he was essentially a healthy scratch when we're trying to win. And now we're going to bring back and say, okay, it's 2021 and everything is all good this year. And now, listen, there's no room for sensitivity in the NFL. Now, there may be room for Dominique and his sensitivity on Get Up, but not in the NFL.
Well, we needed to bring a sensitive man back into the conversation. Go ahead, Nate.
Oh, yeah, I'm a proud sensitive man. If there's no room for sensitivity in NFL, they should make some room for it because you might get better reactions out of your player. And the interesting thing about this situation is Jaws is incredibly smart, and I respect him a lot. But aren't they in this situation because they drafted Jalen Hurts? So why would you acknowledge that part of the problem was signaling to your quarterback that it's not his team, that the way that you're going to fix this situation is by telling him, doubling down on that, like, it's really, really not your team. You're going to have to earn the job. I think Tori nailed it at the top of the segment when he said, you don't pay a dude $100 million and then tell him to fight for his job. So that's a problem. And for all other sensitive men out there, join me. Be proud of your sensitivity.
Very quickly, I would just add to that. I mean, in Green Bay, they drafted a quarterback in the first round. Aaron Rodgers had the best season of his career. So it can go one way or the other. It went the opposite way in Philadelphia. Graziano, what are they expecting to get for him? I mean, this trade is taking a long time. What is it we should expect to see going back to Philadelphia for Carson Wentz?
Well, it's not going to be, Greeny, what they were looking for at the outset, which is, multiple first-round picks or a first-round pick and a startable player. I think they'll get a decent return. I mean, it could be multiple second-rounders. It could be, one first and then a later pick. I think they'll do okay, but I don't think it's going to be anything that blows anybody away. The market for Carson Wentz from the Eagles' standpoint didn't materialize to the extent that they had hoped it would. I do believe he'll be dealt anyway, and all this discussion will be irrelevant because it will be Jalen Hurts' team.